Welcome to Harborview Cove Mysteries. I'm Vera Vining, and I'm so glad you found your way to our little coastal town in Maine. Tonight, we follow amateur sleuth Nora Hartwell as she uncovers secrets in her charming seaside community. So get comfortable, and let's begin our journey to Harborview Cove with Episode 1 of The Lighthouse Keeper's Secret. Nora Hartwell believed she had come home to start over. She believed the hardest chapter of her life was already behind her. What she didn't know, what no one in Harborview Cove knew yet, was that something long buried was already shifting, and once it surfaced, nothing in this quiet coastal town would remain untouched. April arrived in Harborview Cove the way it always did, quietly, not with fanfare or sudden warmth, but with a subtle shift in the air. One morning, Nora noticed it simply smelled different. Less ice and pine, more salt, more wet earth, as if winter had loosened its grip without bothering to announce it. Along Harbor Street, daffodils pushed through the last stubborn patches of snow, small, determined suns nodding in the breeze off the water. The seaside page stood on the corner of Harbor and Main, exactly where it had stood for more than a century. 3 stories tall, Victorian, painted soft sage green with cream-colored trim, a color Nora had chosen herself last summer. Through the large front windows, warm light glowed against the cool morning. Inside, the air smelled like butter and vanilla, lemon zest, and that particular kind of comfort that only came from baking before the rest of the world had properly woken up. Nora Hartwell had been up since 6 a.m., her hands worked the dough for scones on instinct, muscle memory guiding her more than thought. Her grandmother's recipe, the same one that had filled this kitchen for 40 years before Nora inherited the building, the business, and the quiet weight that came with both. 2 years earlier, she had ended her marriage, left Manhattan, and come home to a bookshop that needed saving almost as much as she did. A soft thump landed on the kitchen counter. Nora didn't look up. "Good morning to you too," she said. "And before you start with the judgmental staring, yes, I know I'm 7 minutes late with breakfast." Agatha, a gray tabby with white paws and a remarkable sense of entitlement, sat squarely in the middle of the counter. A forbidden place, one she claimed every single morning with the confidence of someone who knew the rules didn't really apply to her. Named, of course, after Agatha Christie, Agatha began washing her face with one pristine white paw, which, in cat language, meant disappointment. "You know what Nancy Drew would say about your attitude?" Nora asked. Agatha yawned. "She'd say you need to work on your people skills." Nora smiled despite herself, wiped her hands on her apron, and reached for the cat food. "Lucky for you, I'm a pushover." The scones slid into the oven with a soft metallic clink. Nora set the timer, poured Agatha's breakfast into her bowl, and leaned against the counter for just a moment. Through the small kitchen window, the harbor stretched out calm beneath the morning sky. A few fishing boats were already heading out, their engines a distant rumble. Somewhere farther out, a bell buoy clanged in its steady, patient rhythm. This was why she'd come back. By 7:30, the scones were cooling on wire racks, and Nora had slipped into the familiar rhythm of opening the shop. She straightened the new releases table, nudged the reading chairs by the fireplace into place, and checked, twice, that the small sign advertising the tea room's hours was sitting just right. The seaside page wasn't just a bookshop anymore. When Nora had returned and found the business barely holding on, she'd made a decision that would have terrified her old, city-dwelling self. She'd added a tea room to the back half of the main floor, 8 small tables, each with a view of the harbor through wide bay windows. Fresh scones every morning. Proper tea, served properly, the way her grandmother had taught her. Soup and sandwiches at lunch. It had been enough. Enough to keep the doors open. Enough to keep the lights on. enough to keep this place, this anchor, this home, alive. The brass bell above the door chimed. Nora looked up just in time to see Marcus Chen, backing through the entrance, juggling two oversized coffee cups, and wearing the slightly frazzled expression of someone who'd already been awake far too long. "Please tell me one of those is for me," Nora said, "and that it contains at least 3 shots of espresso." Marcus turned, grinning, and handed her the larger cup. "4 shots. Because I know you, and because you texted me at 5:30 this morning with questions about lemon scone ratios." She winced. "That early?" "Yes. Which is not, by the way, a reasonable hour to be awake and baking." "I couldn't sleep." Nora took a long sip and felt her brain slowly come online. "You're a saint." "I'm a man who enables your caffeine dependency." He settled into one of the reading chairs and looked around the shop, his expression softening. "Place looks good, Nora. Feels good. I just made scones and bought books." "You made it feel like coming home." Something in his voice shifted as he said it. A quiet weight, familiar but never quite comfortable. Marcus had grown up in Harborview Cove. He knew every weathered dock plank, every fog-heavy morning. But he'd also lost his older brother here, lost Michael, to what everyone called a tragic accident at sea, when Marcus was just 18. Sometimes grief lived in a place, the way fog lived in a harbor. Always nearby, always capable of rolling back in, without warning. Nora sat in the chair across from him. "How are you doing?" she asked gently. "Really?" He considered the question, then shrugged. "Okay, some days better than others. I was thinking about Michael this morning, actually." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "He would have loved what you've done with this place. He always said Harborview had stories to tell, if people would just listen." "He sounds like he was a good man." "The best." Marcus stood up, picking up his empty cup. "Anyway, enough melancholy before breakfast. I brought you coffee, you owe me scones, and I need to get back before the cafe fills up with fishermen who think early is a personality trait." Nora wrapped 4 scones in wax paper and handed them over. "Tell David I said hello. He says you need to come to dinner soon. We're running out of polite invitations." "I'll come," she promised. "Soon." After Marcus left, the morning settled into its gentle, familiar rhythm. A few early customers wandered the aisles. An older man bought a thriller and asked if she could recommend something. Exactly like it, but different. A young mother picked out 3 picture books, while her toddler attempted to eat a bookmark. Someone called to ask if the shop bought used books. They did. Selectively. It was, Nora thought, as she poured herself a cup of Earl Grey, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. In Harborview Cove. Which meant, of course, that it wouldn't stay that way for long. The bell above the door chimed again at 10:30. This time it announced Beatrice Sullivan. Bee swept into the seaside page with the unmistakable energy of someone who'd already been awake for hours and had something important to share. The kind of energy that made you straighten your posture without realizing why. She was 67, had been the head librarian at Tidewater Library for more than 4 decades, and knew more about Harborview Cove than anyone still living. She wore her steel-gray hair in a neat bun secured with antique hairpins that Nora suspected were older than both of them. Her reading glasses hung from a beaded chain around her neck, and her cardigan, soft, well-worn, and dependable, looked like it had survived several administrations. Her smile, though, was entirely ageless. "Nora," Bee said, her hazel eyes sparkling behind cat-eye frames. "Perfect timing. You're not busy, are you?" "For you." Nora was already reaching for the Earl Grey. "Never." Bee accepted the cup with a pleased nod and settled into one of the reading chairs, as if she were preparing to deliver excellent news, or possibly a very good secret. "The library is hosting a special exhibition next week," she said. Nora paused mid-pour. "You have my attention. We've borrowed something quite extraordinary from the Historical Society." Bee let the silence stretch, just long enough to be effective. "The original Lighthouse keeper's log," she said, lowering her voice slightly. "From 1792. Nora blinked. "Wait. Josiah Blackwood's log?" "The very same. My grandmother used to tell me stories about him," Nora said. "About the early lighthouse, the storms, the ships that didn't make it." "Rose Hartwell was an excellent storyteller," Bee said warmly. "And she didn't exaggerate this time. The log documents the very beginning of Harborview Cove, the lighthouse, shipwrecks, early families, daily life." She took a careful sip of tea. "It's a window into our past, written in Blackwood's own hand." "I didn't even know it still existed." "Oh, it's been preserved for decades," Bee said. "Carefully, reverently, but it's never been displayed publicly. Until now." Nora felt that familiar tug, the one she got when she opened a promising mystery, or sensed a story unfolding just beneath the surface. "We're calling it the Lighthouse Legacy Exhibition," Bee continued. "And we're opening with a reception. Friday evening, 6 o'clock. Light refreshments." Her lips twitched. "Very light. I'm guessing that means cheese cubes and crackers?" "Precisely, which is why I'm hoping you'll bring something edible." Nora smiled. "I can do scones." "I was counting on it." Bee's smile widened. "And there's more. We have a special guest." She leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Dr. Adrian Webb, Boston University, maritime historian." Nora raised an eyebrow. "He came all the way here for the log?" "He contacted us months ago," Bee said. "Apparently, our lighthouse records are among the most complete on the New England coast. He's been researching lighthouse logs for years, and ours is something of a holy grail. That sounds exciting. It is. And charming, according to his references. Bee gave Nora a look over her teacup. You should come. I'd love to. Excellent. Friday evening. 6 o'clock. The library. Bee finished her tea in 3 quick sips. She never lingered. When there were things to be done. And stood, already reaching for her coat. Oh, she added, pausing. Wear something nice. Nora laughed. This is a library exhibition, Bee, not a gala. Nevertheless, Bee said, entirely unbothered. You've been spending far too much time. With just your cat for company. I have friends. Darling, we don't count. We already love you. Bee patted Nora's hand. I'm talking about new people. Specifically, people who might ask you to dinner. With that observation, hanging in the air like a hint of fog, Bee swept back out the door, leaving behind the faint scent of old books and good intentions. Nora glanced toward the window seat where Agatha had appeared, as if summoned. She's not wrong, Nora said. Agatha yawned. I'm choosing to take that as encouragement. The afternoon settled into the kind of quiet that felt earned. Lunch had come and gone in an easy rhythm. Mrs. Patterson from the inn lingered over tomato soup and grilled cheese, chatting about the weather, as if it were a personal acquaintance. The Whitmore sisters shared a pot of chamomile tea and whispered to one another, with the seriousness of people, discussing very important gossip. A pair of tourists asked for recommendations, for authentic Maine experiences, and Nora managed politely not to suggest that authenticity usually involved cold fingers, early mornings, and minding your own business. By 3 o'clock, the shop had slipped into its afternoon lull. This was Nora's favorite time of day. The light slanted in through the front windows just right, warming the wooden floors and softening the edges of everything it touched. Dust motes drifted lazily in the sunbeams. The harbor beyond the glass looked calm and distant, as though it belonged to another world entirely. Nora was restocking the mystery section when she heard footsteps on the stairs that led up from the tea room. Nora? A voice called. You up here? By the mysteries, Nora called back. Maeve Riley appeared between the shelves a moment later, carrying 2 mugs of tea and wearing her usual uniform. Dark jeans, a fitted black t-shirt, and an apron lightly dusted with flour. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical braid, and her green eyes held that familiar spark. That suggested she'd been listening to something dark and unsettling while prepping the kitchen. Maeve had been working at the Seaside Page for nearly 2 years now. Long enough to feel essential. Long enough that Nora couldn't imagine the tea room without her. I brought you tea, Maeve said, handing over a mug. You've been up here a while and you forget to drink. When you're organizing. I don't forget, Nora said, though she accepted it gratefully. I just Lose track. Same thing. Maeve leaned against the shelf, watching her with quiet amusement. Everything ready for tomorrow? Mostly. Bee stopped by earlier. Maeve's eyebrows lifted. That never means nothing. The lighthouse keeper's log, Nora said. From 1792. Maeve's expression shifted. Interest sharpening, something darker flickering. Just beneath it. Josiah Blackwood? You know your local history. I've been reading. Maeve took a sip of her tea. Living in a town this small, you either start learning the past or you run out of true crime podcasts. Nora smiled. There's a reception Friday night at the library. Exhibition opening. Maeve tilted her head. Sounds like the beginning of a documentary. Titled, Secrets Buried by the Sea. Nora laughed. Bee invited me. There's a visiting historian. Maeve hummed softly. Of course there is. You don't sound impressed. I just think old records have a habit of raising questions, Maeve said lightly. Especially in towns like this. Nora smiled. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, Maeve said. Interesting. There's a difference. She glanced toward the window where the harbor lay calm and sunlit. Small towns collect stories. The way the sea collects wreckage. Most of it stays buried until someone starts looking. Nora tilted her head. And you don't like people looking? Maeve smiled, but there was something careful in it. I like when people know when to stop. Want to come? Nora asked. Friday, 6 o'clock. Maeve made a face. An event full of people I don't know, discussing history I don't trust? That's very on-brand for you. I prefer my mysteries at a safe distance, Maeve said lightly. Books, podcasts, things that can't look back. Nora studied her for a moment. Maeve was warm, capable, quick to laugh, but careful. She kept herself tucked, just slightly out of reach. Friendly, but guarded. As if she'd learned somewhere along the way that attention came with consequences. Fair enough, Nora said. But you're missing out. Bee thinks the historian is charming. Maeve snorted. Bee thinks everyone is charming if they read footnotes. She straightened and glanced toward the stairs. I should get back down. Scones don't bake themselves, and the oven's temperamental today. I'll be down in a minute. Maeve paused, her hand resting briefly on the shelf. You okay? She asked. You seem thoughtful? Just one of those days, Nora said. Feels like something's about to happen. Maeve studied her a moment longer, then nodded. Those are usually the interesting ones. After she left, the quiet pressed in again. Nora stood among the mysteries, fingers trailing along familiar spines, thinking about secrets. about the reasons people kept them, about how everyone who came to a small town came for a reason, some running towards something, others running away. She had come back because her marriage had ended, because her grandmother's bookshop needed saving. Those were the simple truths. But the deeper one, the one she didn't say out loud, was that she'd come back because she'd forgotten who she was, somewhere along the way. Forgotten that she loved quiet mornings, old stories, places where people knew her name. Coming home hadn't been giving up. It had been remembering. A Friday evening arrived with clearing skies and the kind of golden light that always seemed to follow spring rain. Nora closed the seaside page at 5:30, flipped the sign on the door, and carried a basket of lemon scones upstairs to her third-floor apartment. She paused in front of her closet longer than she meant to, considering two sweaters as if they held vastly different futures. "What do you think?" she asked Agatha, who was stretched across the bed like a furry throw pillow. "Blue or green?" Agatha flicked one ear. "Blue it is," Nora decided. "Very helpful." By 6:15, fashionably late, which in Harborview Cove meant arriving after the initial rush for free food, Nora climbed the steps of Tidewater Library with the scone basket tucked under her arm. The library stood on the village green, a handsome brick building dating back to 1842. Tall windows glowed warmly against the evening air. Inside, the familiar scent of old paper, polished wood, and something indefinably comforting wrapped around her like a memory. Nora had spent half her childhood here, first on the carpet in the children's section, then wandering the young adult shelves, and eventually claiming one of the worn leather chairs in the reading room. Devouring mystery after mystery while her grandmother worked down the street. Tonight, the reading room was alive in a way it rarely was. 30 or 40 people mingled with small plates of cheese and plastic cups of wine. Familiar faces dotted the room. Mrs. Patterson from the inn, the Whitmore sisters, Marcus and his partner David, Millicent Oakes from the general store. This was Harborview. Small enough that everyone knew everyone. Large enough that you could still keep a few secrets. Nora! Bea appeared at her side, already in motion. "You made it, and you brought scones. Bless you." She relieved Nora of the basket and immediately set it on the refreshments table. "Come," Bea said. "You must meet Dr. Webb." Before Nora could protest, she was gently towed across the room. A man stood near the center display case, studying it with focused attention. He was in his late 40s, wearing a tweed jacket with elbow patches that somehow managed to look sincere rather than theatrical. His posture suggested enthusiasm barely contained. "Dr. Webb," Bea said brightly, "this is Nora Hartwell. She owns the Seaside Page." He turned, smiling. Delighted, he said, his accent more British than Bostonian. Please, call me Adrian. Dr. Webb makes me sound like I should be examining throats rather than old logs. Nora, she said, shaking his hand. Nice to meet you. Are you interested in local history? He asked. More in mysteries, she admitted, but I suspect they overlap. Oh, absolutely, Adrian said. History is simply mystery with better lighting. Bea tapped a spoon against her wineglass, and the room gradually quieted. Thank you all for coming, she said. Tonight, we celebrate a remarkable piece of Harborview's history. She gestured toward the glass display case. The Lighthouse keeper's log was begun in 1792 by Josiah Blackwood, the first keeper of our lighthouse. For over 30 years, he recorded the daily rhythms of life on this coast: weather, ships, storms, and the growth of a town that would become our home. The log lay open beneath the glass. Its pages were yellowed, the ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was careful and elegant, each letter shaped with intention. Nora leaned closer, reading fragments she could make out. October 14th, 1792. Weather fair. The sloop. Providence arrived. There's something humbling about it, Adrian said quietly. The discipline of it. The care. Day after day, without knowing anyone would ever read it. After the presentation, conversation resumed. As people filtered out into the cool night air, Nora took one last look at the log. Something about it tugged at her. Quietly. Persistently. Like a story waiting to be told. The phone rang at 7:15. Nora had just finished pouring coffee. Agatha was circling her feet, voicing strong opinions about the unacceptable delay of breakfast. Nora? Bea's voice came through the line thin and unsteady. Nora, something's wrong. Nora's hand tightened around the mug. What happened? It's gone, Bea said. The log. Someone's taken it. For a moment, the words didn't quite make sense. What do you mean, gone? I came in early, like I always do on Saturdays. I wanted to set up the reading room for Dr. Webb. And the display case. Bea took a shaky breath. The lock was broken. The log isn't there. The kitchen felt suddenly too quiet. I've called the police, Bea continued. They're on their way. Nora, could you come? Please? I'm coming, Nora said. Right now. She hung up, set the coffee aside untouched, and grabbed her coat. Agatha watched from the counter, tail flicking. Breakfast is going to be late, Nora told her. Again. Agatha meowed in disapproval. The library looked different in the early morning light. A police car sat at the curb, lights off but unmistakable. The front steps felt steeper than usual as Nora climbed them, her thoughts moving faster than her feet. Inside, Tidewater Library felt stripped of its warmth. The familiar hush was sharper somehow, edged with tension. A young police officer stood near the display case, writing in a small notebook. He was tall, posture rigid, his expression focused to the point of severity. Bee sat in one of the reading chairs, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller than she had the night before. Nora, Bee said when she saw her. Relief flickered across her face. Nora crossed the room and sat beside her, taking her cold hands in her own. Tell me what happened. The officer glanced up. Ma'am, this is a crime scene. I know, Nora said quietly. I'm here for her. He hesitated, then nodded once. Officer Lucas Bennett. Nora Hartwell. His expression shifted slightly, recognition, but not familiarity. The bookshop owner. Yes. I've heard of you. He closed his notebook, not unkindly. Word around town is you like a good mystery. Nora smiled faintly. I like good stories. Lucas said. Those usually turn into trouble. Only if you're not paying attention. That earned her the briefest curve of a smile before he caught himself. Just try not to turn this into one of your stories, he said. This is a police matter. I wouldn't dream of it, Nora said. Lucas looked unconvinced. As Lucas moved away to make a call, Nora stared at the empty display case. The log had been there less than 12 hours ago. Safe. Locked. Watched over. Now it was gone. And Nora couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't been taken for money. It had been taken for what it knew. Nora walked back to the bookshop slowly. The morning had brightened while she'd been inside the library. Sunlight spilled across the village green, cheerful and unconcerned, as if nothing at all had happened. A gull cried somewhere overhead. A delivery truck rattled past. The world, apparently, had decided to carry on. The bell above the seaside page chimed as she stepped inside, and the familiar warmth wrapped around her like a held breath finally released. Bookshelves stood exactly where she'd left them. The fireplace chairs were still neatly aligned. Agatha sat in the window seat, tail tucked neatly around her paws. She looked up as Nora entered and let out a single pointed meow. I know, Nora said, shrugging out of her coat. You were right. I shouldn't have left without feeding you. Agatha blinked slowly, magnanimous in her forgiveness. Nora moved behind the counter and set her keys down, hands lingering there longer than necessary. The stillness felt different now. Thicker. As if the shop itself was listening. Someone had taken the log. Not smashed glass or stolen electronics. Not cash from a register. A book. A 200-year-old record of storms and ships and quiet, careful observations. Something irreplaceable. Something that had belonged to the town long before it had belonged to anyone else. And someone had wanted it badly enough to break a lock for it. Nora poured herself fresh coffee she didn't particularly want and stood at the counter, staring out at the harbor. The water was calm again, reflecting the sky so perfectly it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Lucas's voice echoed faintly in her memory. "Try not to turn this into one of your stories." She exhaled slowly. By late morning, the rhythm of the shop had returned. The bell chimed. Footsteps passed. Pages turned. Agatha relocated herself to a sunlit patch on the counter and promptly fell asleep, as if nothing in the world required vigilance. Nora handled transactions, made notes for the tea room, and nodded along to small talk, but her attention kept circling back to the same thought. "I'm not investigating," she told Agatha, who had hopped down from the window seat and now sat watching her with narrowed eyes. "I'm just thinking." Agatha flicked her tail. "That's allowed," Nora said. "Thinking is not a crime." She glanced around the shop, at the spines she knew by heart. Mysteries lined one entire wall, stories of missing objects, hidden motives, truths buried just beneath the surface. Every mystery began the same way, with something that didn't make sense. The lock had been forced, but carefully. No mess. No rush. Whoever had taken the log knew exactly what they were doing. Knew when to come. Knew what they wanted. And had likely been standing in that very reading room the night before. Nora wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the warmth steady her. She thought of Bee's shaken voice, of Adrian's stunned expression, of the way the empty display case had looked. Too clean, too deliberate. This hadn't been about money. It had been about knowledge. Outside, a boat horn sounded low and distant. The bell above the shop door chimed as a customer entered, and for a moment, Nora considered letting the whole thing go. Let the police handle it. Let the questions belong to someone else. That would be the sensible choice. She waited for the urge to fade. It didn't. Nora set her coffee down and opened her laptop. "I'm just going to read," she said quietly, mostly to herself. "That's not interfering. That's research." Agatha jumped onto the counter, unimpressed but attentive. Nora typed carefully into the search bar. Josiah Blackwood Harborview Lighthouse 1792. Outside, The harbor glittered in the sun. Inside, the bookshop hummed softly with the sounds of an ordinary morning. But Nora knew better now. Something in Harborview Cove had been disturbed. And whatever secrets the lighthouse keeper had written down all those years ago, someone, somewhere in town, believed they were worth stealing. She leaned back in her chair, curiosity stirring, familiar and insistent. Agatha meowed. I know, Nora said. We're absolutely staying out of it. She clicked search. Thank you for spending this evening in Harborview Cove. If you enjoyed tonight's mystery, please subscribe to join Nora in the next episode as she discovers more secrets surrounding the old Harborview Lighthouse, and leave a like to help other cozy mystery lovers find us. You can also leave a comment letting me know what you thought of the first episode. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you next time in Harborview Cove.